Warning: this episode of Creative Destruction Video contains spoilers for Smile 2, as well as frank discussions of mental illness and disordered eating. One of the great benefits of a long tracking shot is the buildup of tension it creates. Without distinct cuts between shots, the scene lingers in perpetual time. The longer the shot goes on, the more likely something has to happen. The director wouldn't hold out a cut for this long if we weren't waiting for something. Sometimes, in a film like Goodfellas, the long tracking shot is meant to denote the speed at which powerful people can get what they want. In Boogie Nights, it's an opportunity to meet the characters and their overlapping spaces within the plot. For a film like Atomic Blonde, it's a chance to watch an action scene play out in levels of tension in real time. In Smile 2, the sustained tracking shot is used to put us in the head of a person experiencing a complete psychotic break. Or maybe it's a shot of a person trying to overcome demonic possession. Or maybe it's neither of those things. Smile 2 is a better film than anybody would expect. It's a sequel to a middling to good horror film that became a box office hit. And one could predict Smile 2 following a similarly modest plot with a built-in audience to buy tickets again. But that's not what Smile 2 is. Parker Finn, the writer and director of both Smile films, took the success of the first film to reach ambitious new heights for the sequel, both in terms of filmmaking and in thematic exploration. While the first film was a study in grief and depression, the second film is a more nuanced and multifaceted approach to a person experiencing a delusional break from reality, brought upon, in their case, by PTSD. The lead performance by Naomi Scott, who plays pop star Sky Riley, elevates the film's themes and ambitions to unexpected heights. Smile 2 is surprising, not only because it's an unusually effective horror film and horror sequel, but because of its extremely realistic portrayal of psychological mania. To explain just how realistic this portrayal is, let me tell you a story about the time I almost died. I knew it was a problem when I could hear my own heartbeat. It was 3 a.m. I'd been awake for 40 hours. I lay in the twin bed in my single-person dorm room and counted the heartbeats which seemed to echo against the cinder block walls. A reminder that I'm alive, but also a reminder that each beat is counting down, an obsession with the heart of animals, the speed of the beats denoting the length of a life. I didn't know what was wrong with me. In the 40 hours I'd been awake, I'd read 3 books, written 40 pages of a novel, and run 7 miles. I hadn't eaten. I'd had nothing to drink. It was all adrenaline. I wanted to drive my car somewhere far away, to cross state lines and see the landscape change. I started going through wooden pallets behind the dorm building and planning out a shelf I wanted to build. As I lay there, listening to my heartbeat, my jaw cracked. Pain shot down my spine. My jaw had been so clenched I nearly broke my teeth in half. Even though it was February and bitter cold, I couldn't stand the sheets over my body. It was so hot, so suffocatingly hot. Our library on campus was open 24 hours. I got into the habit of heading over around 2 a.m., grabbing a handful of books and reserving a private study room. The library had a room full of CDs, so sometimes I'd take a stack of CDs in the room, put on some headphones, and read for hours. In one semester, I read 70 books in the middle of the night. The lack of sleep was catching up with me. My heartbeat was getting louder. It was around that time I started hearing voices. When we first meet Sky Riley, she's rehearsing choreography for her comeback tour. The past couple of years have been hard for her. Following a messy addiction and public recovery, she and her boyfriend were in a fatal car accident, with Riley surviving only after a painful spinal injury and surgery. The combination of the shock of her loss, her new addiction to prescription pain medication, and the mounting pressures of her world tour, they're all coming to a crescendo in these coming days. It's not just her career she's responsible for. She has a team of people counting on her to succeed, to overcome everything, and to reclaim her former pop glory. Following a year of depression, Riley is feeling the stirrings of a manic episode. When I was 20 years old, I went to the nurse on staff at my college. They checked my pulse and blood pressure and told me I was at risk of having a stroke. At that time, I was just sleeping a couple of hours every few days, losing track of time, experiencing violent mood swings, and eating almost nothing. I'd lost 30 pounds in 2 months. At night, it wasn't just my own heartbeat that I heard. I also heard something else. It started as an impulse, not so much a voice as just an idea, a motivation. I had to walk outside. I had to throw away my food. 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 steps every day, walking endless laps around the perimeter of the campus and feeling the skin against my waistline shrink. A voice. Was it mine? Telling me I could be smaller. I could just keep shrinking and taking up less space. I want to call it a real voice, something I could recognize as language, but it wasn't that. I don't know how it works with other people who have been there, fighting against their own brain, but for me, it wasn't a voice in the room with me. It was an itch that needed scratching. It was the voice of addiction and impulse and distraction. In Smile 2, Sky feels the same voice. It tells her to seek out the pills that make her pain go away. In the apartment of her dealer, Sky sees something violent and shocking. It triggers something in her brain, every memory of every violent act she's ever witnessed, and the wiring of her brain fires in this new pattern. That night, and for the next several nights, she's not sleeping. Instead, she hears things, sees things. Her blood pressure rises, and her brain deceives her, betrays her, and transforms the waking world into something altogether uncanny. When you're not sleeping or eating, your body betrays you. Typical cognitive functions break down, decision-making and logic are compromised, and your senses are no longer trustworthy. At night, as I counted my heartbeats, I remember seeing something in the corner of my dorm. A dark figure with a long and shadowy arm. Sometimes I could hear it breathing. I could hear the creaking of its joints. Was I asleep in those moments when I could just barely make out its eyes beside my dresser? In the mornings, I'd be seized by panic, a whole body shock of anxiety and paranoia. When I walked to class, I thought I'd catch my name coming from a group of people I didn't even know. I'd look over and they'd be staring back at me. What did they want? It was isolating. Who was I going to talk to about this? What was even happening? If you tell people you're seeing things and hearing things, they kick you out of school. They send you to a hospital. They disrupt your life. Obviously, my life was plenty disrupted already. Nothing was going well. But when you're in that state, you think you're making it work. You think other people aren't noticing because you're masking so well. Smile 2 takes the paranoia and the delusions of a manic episode and plays them out to their absolute worst consequences. Imagine you're paranoid that people are trying to get to you, that people are talking about you and staring at you. And then imagine that you're a popular celebrity and that your paranoia in some ways is true. People really are trying to get to you. People really are staring. How could you ever feel safe? How could you ever feel sane? Because Sky Riley's career is the scaffolding required for the careers of so many other people attached to her, there's no reason for them to truly get her the help she needs. She's an artist, so she's always going to be a little idiosyncratic. It's probably nerves or pressure or part of her recovery. But we have to keep moving forward. The show must go on. Sky's mother, who also acts as her manager, enables Sky's masking in order to save the tour. The worse Sky gets, the more her mother shields her from the people who could really help. When you believe you're truly going crazy, you will do anything to prove your sanity. There's a public shaming, a social isolation unlike anything else associated with losing your mind. That, coupled with the paranoia and the delusions, make for a combination in which it's nearly impossible to find help for yourself. Sky's mother doesn't intervene because too much is at stake. Nobody fully intervenes because the machinery of the tour is too big. It's Sky's last chance at maintaining her status. The title of the film, Smile, comes from what this demon or ghost or entity does in its possession of its victim. It appears to the victim as a smile worn on the faces of the people around them. In the first film, the smile represents the ways in which mental health professionals abuse victims and people experiencing grief mask their true feelings with a false sense of contentment. In the second film, the smile represents the public lives we cultivate and how they sometimes stand in for the more complicated feelings we have in our private lives. Sky smiles to her friends. She smiles for the cameras and she smiles for the team helping her prepare for her tour. But privately, she is experiencing a tremendous crisis. After the violence she witnesses at her dealer's apartment, Sky sees the uncanny smiles of the people around her, not as kind and loving and warm, but as hostile. One of the most effective scenes in the film happens at a meet and greet where a line of fans wait to get a picture with Sky. One of the fans, a disturbed and unstable man, becomes violent. Sky's helplessness in that moment and her team's insistence that she continue the meet and greet is directly juxtaposed with the memories of how she got her injury, the lowest point in her life. Later, Sky is approached by a young girl who also wears this haunted smile. Sky can't unsee the barely concealed threats of each person that wants something from her, but who can't give her anything she actually needs. In my own lowest moments, at the apex of my worst manic episode, I was 40 pounds underweight. I was sleeping less than an hour a night, walking 25,000 steps a day, reading for hours every night, and sometimes spending entire weekends without even leaving my dorm a single time. The worse I got, the less likely it felt for me to reach out. The harder it got to even explain what was happening. As the film continues, Sky's relationship with reality blurs to the point of complete distortion. At a low moment, she reaches out to a friend she's treated badly in the past, and when her friend, Gemma, tries to help Sky distinguish her delusions from reality, Sky's mind rejects all of Gemma's logic. It's impossible for her to overcome the delusions she spent so long building around herself, and it's Gemma herself who seems to not only be untrustworthy, but entirely created by the subconscious of Sky. The terrifying truth of mania is its total selfishness. Your mind cannot reach outside of itself. The longer you experience a manic episode, the more solipsistic your life becomes. Imagine being trapped in a mental state somewhere between dream and reality. Your mind is convinced that there's an almost supernatural force within you that can bend reality to its will. The more sleep you lose and the fewer true connections you have to others, the more impossible it is to distinguish truth with fiction. There is an inherent selfishness to this state of mind. You can't trust anybody but yourself. Not only do you believe that you're the only person who understands the truth of reality, but you're paranoid that other people are trying to keep the truth from you. The clever trick of Smile 2 is its use of a pop star to hammer home the selfishness of the delusional state of mania. For Sky, everything really is about her. She really does have adoring fans. She really has bent the world to her will. The delusions her mind concocts aren't terribly distant from the reality of her life. Sky's mental collapse is built on the nature of celebrity, but her manic episode is immediately familiar for the thousands of people who have experienced them. At the end of my worst episode, emaciated and exhausted, I finally found a doctor who knew what to do. I went into therapy, found effective medications, and started working toward a more balanced and healthier lifestyle. But for countless others, that's not what happens. When people discuss bipolar disorder, they're more likely to talk about the swings between stability and depression. But mania is rarely discussed with the same frequency. Just like depression, mania can deconstruct an entire life. It can isolate you from friends and family, blur the lines between truth and delusion, and it can make you question the relationships you have with the outside world. Smile 2, a horror sequel released by a major studio, somehow captures that feeling of a manic episode better than any film I've ever seen. As always, thank you for watching.